In 1980, Queen had just recorded a song that didn't sound like Queen. No guitar solo, no layered harmonies, just a hypnotic bass groove and cryptic lyrics about a guy named Steve. The band wasn't convinced, except for one person, someone not even in the band. This is behind the track. The stories behind the songs, like you've never heard them before. John Deacon was the last to join Queen in 1971. Shy, soft-spoken, and deeply insecure, he always felt like the outsider.
I came along in a way as a bit of an outsider at first, and it did take me quite a few years to sort of grow more into the group, and find myself at home, really.
He had backup plans. He studied electronic engineering, just in case the music didn't work out.
It was only a spare time thing, even with Queen, I really didn't expect it to take off, really.
He rarely spoke in interviews. He barely spoke at all. But he was listening and learning. At first, he only played bass, but Freddie Mercury encouraged him to write. Over the years, Deacon wrote fan favorites like You're My Best Friend, Spread Your Wings, I Want to Break Free, and Friends Will Be Friends. And in 1980, he brought in a song called Another One Bites the Dust. Was hanging out at Chick's studio in 1979, fascinated by their song Good Times.
John Deacon and I were hanging out together, like partying the night before I did Good Times.
He loved the funk feel, the groove, the space. Then he thought, what if I wrote a funk song for Queen?
I started it off in England, actually. We had some time off, and I'd always wanted to do something a little bit more that was more sort of disco-y, which was very uncool at the time. It wasn't the sort of thing.
At first, he just scribbled ideas, phrases from old Western movies. One line kept coming back, another one bites the dust.
But luckily, in a way, it came out quite heavily. But I started it off with actually a completely different set of lyrics. It was all about cowboys, which is why the American phrase "Another One Bites the Dust" came in, really. But then I thought that was very silly. I never even got to show that to the band. I decided to change it before then. So I changed the lyrics altogether.
The track needed darker lyrics, grittier energy, something cooler and heavier.
To bite the dust is a cowboy phrase. And that's all I had at first, just the line. And when we went in the studio, I had a set of lyrics I've never seen. I've never showed them to anybody. I was so embarrassed about them in the end. They were all about cowboys. And like there's a little story, like at the end of each verse, another one bit the dust. But when we recorded it in Munich, we did the backing track, and it sort of came out, it was a bit heavier, really, whereas the cowboy thing was like a little bit more lighthearted and humorous. So I decided to change the lyrics.
Originally, he wrote the verses as a humorous Western pastiche, but something happened in the studio. When Queen began working at Musicland in Munich, the bass line came out heavier than expected, funkier, darker. So Deacon scrapped the comedy and rewrote the lyrics into something colder, a street fight, a betrayal, a slow emotional breakdown in 3 acts. Act 1, Steve walks warily down the street. Act 2, he's abandoned, heartbroken, furious. Act 3, he warns there are many ways to hurt a man. And yet, no one knew who Steve was. Was it a metaphor, a revenge fantasy, a breakup, a shot at the tabloids? Even Roger Taylor said later, we didn't really get it. But the groove? Oh, they felt it. Deacon had been hanging out in the studio with the band, Chick. The magic behind the groove wasn't just inspiration. It was a technique, what some now call the rhythm contrast method. Here's how it works. The bass line is rhythmically complex. That contrast creates pocket. It's what makes the song feel like it's constantly moving, but never overwhelming. And it was Deacon who insisted Roger Taylor keep the drums simple. Without that push, the groove might have never worked.
John got Roger to play with tape all over his drums, which is exactly what Roger hated. Roger hated his drums being made to sound dead.
In fact, we used, a drum loop, for the thing, because it was just so simple, and that's all I wanted all the way through, something just solid, really. And that was the way of doing it. Because it wasn't the sort of music everybody, we played at all, really. And I think the band was as surprised as I was that it became so successful, especially in America.
Normally, singers avoid stepping on the bass rhythm, but not Freddie. He aligned his vocal phrasing with the bass, mimicking it. It created a locked-in, almost mechanical swagger. Deacon didn't just write a groove. He made Freddie dance through it.
Freddie got deeply into it. Freddie sort of sang it until he bled because he was so committed to making it sound the way John wanted it, which was like hardcore, I don't know what you would call it, but it's kind of more towards black music than white music.
There's a reason Another One Bites the Dust is instantly recognizable. It checks two simple boxes from the anthemic riff checklist. 1, few notes, just 3 to 5. 2, notes close together so anyone can hum or sing it. Simple, iconic, infectious. John recorded most of the track himself. Bass, rhythm and lead guitar, piano, percussion. Brian May added guitar effects. Roger Taylor's drums were taped and looped, a technique he reportedly disliked at the time.
I didn't really want to get into dance music. It wasn't my thing.
Deacon didn't use his usual Fender Precision bass. For this track, he picked a Music Man Stingray, the same bass Bernard Edwards used on Good Times. The Stingray had a more nasal, punchy tone, perfect for disco funk. And yes, the entire recording was slightly sharp in pitch. Whether intentional or a byproduct of analog tape speed, it made the track sound brighter, faster, tighter. But still, Queen didn't think it should be a single. They debated it in the studio. And then came the backstage moment. After a concert in Los Angeles, Michael Jackson showed up backstage.
We were playing in the Forum, I think, in Los Angeles, and Michael Jackson used to come and sit in the corner and go like that. And he said, "You guys have got to release this." We actually said, "You guys, you got to release." So I said, "No, you're mad. That won't be a hit."
Roger Taylor wasn't convinced. He later said, "I wasn't enamored with it." I said, "You're kidding. That's never a single." But Freddie listened, and so did John. They took a chance. Was it a ripoff of Good Times? Maybe a bit. Chic came first, but Chic themselves were inspired by Hollywood swinging from Kool and the Gang. And someone probably inspired them too. What Deacon did was take a bass line, simplify it, tighten it, reshape it into something instantly singable and impossible to forget. Queen released Another One Bites the Dust in August 1980. It became their biggest hit ever, #1 in the US, 31 weeks on the Billboard Hot 100, over 7 million copies sold, their first major crossover into black and disco audience. Some fans thought the singer was black. They didn't know Freddie yet.
I remember we were doing a run at Madison Square Garden at the time, and I remember being in the car in New York, and some of the there's some young black guys there, and they were going, "You guys are bad." And I thought, "Oh, do they like us or not?" You know.
Not everything about Another One Bites the Dust was planned. In fact, two of the most iconic details were complete accidents. The first came in the middle of the track, during the breakdown. Producer Reinhold Mack was experimenting with a digital effects unit called the Infernal Machine, on loan from a French manufacturer. He reached over to mute a track, and his finger slipped. The sound went straight through the machine, creating a strange, warped texture that no one had heard before. It wasn't intentional, but everyone loved it. The second mistake came at the very end. After the track was finished, after it had hit #1, John Deacon pulled Mack aside. "It's not perfect," he said. Mack asked why, and Deacon replied, "At the very end, there's a hi-hat. I forgot to mute it." It's still there. If you listen closely to the final second of the song, you'll hear it. A tiny flaw on a flawless hit. The final tempo of the song, 110 beats per minute. That's the exact rhythm recommended for CPR chest compressions. It's now used in CPR training courses.
To achieve the correct tempo, some suggest thinking of the disco track, Staying Alive. Instead, I opt for Queen's Another One Bites the Dust.
They tried to repeat the formula with the Hot Space album in 1982.
Well, Freddie, could you describe exactly what your new sound is on Hot Space?
It's not totally new because it started off by John writing Another One Bites the Dust, which was on the previous album. And I think since then we sort of decided that we'd sort of carry on with that kind of sound. It's basically sort of me. I mean, it doesn't really travel through the group that way. It's sort of, we have individual approaches, really. I sort of opted out for that kind of sound.
But fans rejected the disco funk overload. Only years later did that album gain appreciation. Still, Another One Bites the Dust stands alone. Not just a song, a gamble, a transformation, a hit that came from the quietest man in the band and the boldest man in pop. Michael Jackson saw something in that groove, and because of him, Queen trusted it. They took the shot. He was right. Subscribe for more stories behind the songs, because sometimes the quiet ones write the loudest hits.